In respect to your listening experience, there is a brief mention of childhood sexual trauma, and there is a fair amount of swearing in case you may have small children or company nearby. Content in general speaks to nightmares, sleep paralysis, generational trauma, and core wounds. Listeners' discretion is advised. Thank you, and now enjoy the show. Our modern Western culture places little to no value on the power of our nightly dreams
to inspire, shift, and reorganize our lives.
This podcast demands a deep reconsideration of
the role our dreams play on our path to a more vital
and meaningful life. The following is living proof
of the life-affirming power of dreams
to affect change
and redirect the trajectory
of our inner and outer lives. These
are the dreams that shape us.
Dreams that shape us.
What makes a believer out of a skeptic? And what turns an atheist into a deeply spiritual person? Notice I didn't say religious person. Our guest, Ryan Hurd, grew up in the American Deep South. And religion? Yeah. Wait till you hear his story about why he left the Cub Scouts and, in general, rejected the religion of his culture. But you are about to hear, from an early age, he learned a compassionate and curiosity-filled approach to his dreams, and it made a believer out of him. A believer that something is engaging us in our dreams for the purpose of personal growth. We won't call it God, but it bears a resemblance. There's a power in dreams that compels us to find out what's engaging us, what's challenging us to grow, and to think of better ways of reacting. Ryan had personal demons. He had bullies. He had enemies who picked him as a target simply because he's way smart and super kind. And he learned a better way of facing them. Wait till you hear about the power that forgiveness sets loose. It truly is the righter of wrongs and the healer of broken hearts. Later, I will tell you about how hearing this conversation between Ryan and my co-host, Stevie E, came at exactly the right time for me personally. We hope that what you hear will be what you need to hear. Many people out there have been on the receiving end of bullying and trauma and abuse, and the dreams they have about it can be horrible and repetitive, nightmares. Sometimes the dark shadows appear at your bedside and try to make you believe that the darkness wins over the light. But that's a lie, and Ryan is about to tell you why, along with my co-host, Steve Ernenwein. I'm your co-host, J.M. DeBoard. Thank you for joining us. And now, here's Steve and Ryan.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Dreams That Shape Us podcast. I am here with none other than Ryan Hurd. Ryan is an amazing researcher. He's written several books on dreaming and lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis. He's an archaeologist. Dude is awesome in every way. I'm super honored to have you on the show here tonight to share an amazing slew of dreams that you've had that really showcase how you can utilize lucid dreaming to confront nightmarish figures and dreams in general. This is a lot of the work that I've done myself with lucid dreaming, and it's a huge passion point for me with lucid dreaming. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you tonight. And I think the listeners will bear witness to just how potent and powerful it really can be to confront nightmares in a lucid kind of manner. And yeah, there's so many topics within that we'll get to. I'm gonna just jump right in to get you set up here. I know that. Well, if I'm remembering this right, I believe that you kind of were prompted into dream work and maybe specifically lucid dreaming through nightmares. Is that how I'm remembering it?
Oh, yes. Well, and no. I mean, I always have to say, was it really that bad when I start out? Because, my mother listens to these podcasts, and I always have to be like, no, I had a good childhood, and I'm not as haunted as I make it out to be. Because honestly, the first dream I remember was a hypnagogic reverie when I was probably 6, maybe 7. And it was me closing my eyes and trying to go to sleep, and all of the hypnagogic, all those beautiful geometric images, all the glinty sort of sacred geometry, shapes and colors all swirling together. And then it became a 3-dimensional portal.
Wow.
And I fell into the portal. And that was, age 7. And so it started off pretty good, I'd say. Let's start there.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. I think that's probably one of my earliest memories of it. And, it's something that I never thought about until I kind of stumbled into my spiritual life, where it was like, I remember one night staring into the back of my eyelids, like they teach you to do. Didn't know what I was doing. I was probably in like 3rd or 4th grade. And yeah, all of a sudden I just felt myself lift up off the bed and just spun in a circle. And it was hilarious and funny, but then it got scary and I pulled myself back to the bed. And then I tried again one other night and couldn't do it again. And I just forgot about it for years.
Right. It's like that first taste that you hear about, that first taste of enlightenment, or that stage beyond, where we're just dropped into it, fully realized. And then we kind of stumble back into life and development. But kids are natural dreamers, right? They're just, that's just, my story is not unusual, especially in a household that appreciates dreams and makes space for dreams. And that's really the unit, the household unit is the way that we should think about dream positivity and the movement, the grassroots movement of dream work. Is this a dream positive house, or home, are dreams spoken about, around the breakfast table or at dinner or before bed? And for me, that was a yes. Oh. And I feel just so blessed by that opportunity to share that intimate part of myself that wasn't shut down. And that's key. It's key to it all.
Yeah, that's huge. I like that term, dream positivity. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, but I love it.
I mean, right? Because we're rebuilding something, and we've got to be big about it, because we're fighting these default forces that are just like sleep and forget. Don't worry, we'll dream for you. Just right. Just turn on the TV and binge, and we've got it all figured out. Here's the narratives that are important. We've got to. That's what we're up against.
Yeah, it's very true. I think that's one of the, with reality checks, when I first started doing reality checks, that's like one of the most revolutionary things that I experienced when I started doing lucid dreaming, was like, I have never, ever questioned whether I'm awake or not. Like, it seems so simple, like now, like this many years down the road, but that's a huge thing to like. I would have to say most of the population being like, I mean, it seems silly, I'm sure, but if you really think about it, like that's huge. That like none of us ever really question whether we're really alive or like really awake or if this is all a dream. It's nuts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I call that cognitive domestication because we've all been domesticated, and we're all kind of running in ruts. And I think it's probably evolutionary to do the simplest things. You figure out what works, and you stay in your rut. I mean, that's the way that it works until it doesn't.
Yeah,
it works till it doesn't.
Wow. Okay. So when you fell into the portal, what happened?
Well, that's the funny part. I don't remember. It wasn't. This was what I do remember is that this was more than once, and it was a method that I would use to fall asleep. And so I wasn't trying to have a dream. I was just trying to make it through the gateway and to rest. And so. Right. So I don't know what happened next. But I must have been a fairly alert and anxious individual. I've always been alert and anxious as a temperament. And so I needed a method and I needed a procedure for me to make it through. Otherwise, I would stay up and fret. And this was true even as a child. And so, and that's the method that found me. And yeah, very thankful for that. Very thankful for that method.
Yeah, that's very interesting that's how you'd fall asleep. Oh man, that's like hyper metaphysical. I'm gonna force myself through this gateway just to fall asleep.
But kids, I mean, again,
I know.
It's not unusual. I was, so this past summer, I was sitting in a circle of a bunch of toddlers. So I'm talking like 3 to 5 year olds. And it was, I was co-oping for the summer co-op. And I was trying to kill some time because it was story time, but the teacher hadn't shown up with the story yet. And so I was like, hey, do y'all remember your dreams? And we just kind of went around, and a lot of kids said no, which is typical, or they couldn't think of one at the time. And then there was a couple children who were just like, yes, last night I dreamt blah, 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 blah. And they just go on and on about these elaborate, amazing adventures, which are sometimes quite horrifying. It is just like, whoa, like you just give children, an opportunity to open up this part of themselves, and they're there for it. They're there for it. And then later we had an activity. We made dream masks where they were able to embody dream figures, and a lot of them just did animals, because like their kids are really into animal powers, especially the 3 to 5, and it was so much fun. But then you think about what is the content of kids who report dreams of that age, and there's so many animals. I mean, they're just like in this like rich stew of nature and and not just like survival of the fittest in that kind of stark way, but it's so playful, and they are flexible and pliable, and they're transforming, and they have superpowers. You know what I mean? Like, so it starts really, really early.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, man. Well, cool. Let's fast forward a little bit, and how did the nightmares and lucid dreaming kind of come together for you? How did that whole kind of nexus happen?
Yeah, so for me, I really was interested in dreams as as an adolescent, and And I remember it was a friend's mother who came to my local youth group and gave a talk about dreams and dream interpretation. I think I was probably 14 at the time. And I just was really lit up about that. And that was when I kept my first dream journal at that point. I started my own dream journal at that age. But I have a journal that's even earlier than that, where I wrote down my first dream. And I think it was about age 11 or so when I had my first dream. And I was sure it was a psychic dream. I had some kind of, it's like elaborate synchronicity, I guess you would say now. And I can't remember the details of it, but it struck me. And I think that's really the most important thing really for this discussion is that it impacted me and my view of the world and what was possible. Like somehow mystery, opened up. And there was something, and I had a front seat at it. Like I was part of the mystery. And that was really kind of a watershed moment for me. And then not too long after that, I began having what I know now is sleep paralysis, but I didn't know what that was when I was 12 and 13. And my first experience of sleep paralysis was pretty standard, which means it was horrific. And it was just, it began with a nightmare. And in fact, this is the nightmare. It was in a sort of an ominous space, and the phone rings, and it's like one of those old-fashioned, huge phones. You're like, pick it up. It's a big red phone, and I'm like, hello, and this huge, dark, deep voice comes through, and it says, "Darkness rules."
Oh no.
Darkness rules. And I immediately woke up, right? I woke up with my heart pounding, and as I settled back to sleep and I laid back down, that's when I suddenly felt this constriction and this tightness and this weight on my chest. And it felt like I was getting dragged down and pushed down into my bed. Ooh. And I was awake and aware. And so totally, were my eyes open or closed? I can't recall, but I still felt like, this wasn't fair because I was on this side of the dream, and yet I felt like I was getting pulled into the dream. And my 11-year-old, 12-year-old kind of dualistic sensibilities, I was getting dragged into hell. Is how I felt it. It was awful. And at the same time, right, the emotions just began getting more intense. And there is that sensed presence that something was in the room with me, and that it was responsible for these feelings, and it was responsible for the sensations, and it was just malevolent and wanted to hurt me. And it was just the most unsafe I've ever felt in my life.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
So, right. And this is it. This is sleep paralysis in its isolated forms. It starts to happen sometimes in adolescence. It comes unbidden. And I lucked out again. I really lucked out because I started to think about something to counteract what was happening. So I basically said, okay, I'm going to think about the power of love. I'm going to think about love. And so I immediately began thinking about this person who I had a crush on in school. And I just began thinking about her. And what happened is it all melted away. It just all evaporated, and the feelings and the pressure and the intensity and the sensed presence just poof. And I was able to get up. I was able to physically move again, and the spell had been broken. So, wow, that was the point that I said, there is something more to sleep that someone hasn't told me yet.
Man, that's so crazy. Wow. Yeah, like we had spoken before, and I had told you my one experience with sleep paralysis. And I guess for the listener's sake, it's a real quick story, but it's hilarious. I was in college, and I had just moved in with a new roommate. He was a really good friend of mine the year before, and we had to share a bedroom in the apartment that we moved into together. It was just like a little small, tiny apartment that was on campus, and I started to wake up, and I had sleep paralysis, and I couldn't move, and it was the first time. I was into lucid dreaming at the time, but I don't think I'd ever heard about sleep paralysis yet somehow. And so I had no idea what was happening, and I was terrified, and I didn't really have any of the visuals that a lot of people talk about, but I just couldn't move, and it was terrifying because like I'm sure you can attest. I mean, it's, you can't move, and you instantly panic. And so I'm like trying to scream, and I think I'm kind of like looking out of the corner of my eyes, like my roommate over there sleeping right across from me, and I'm trying to scream, and eventually the paralysis gives way, and this choked out, awful sounding scream just chirps out of my mouth, and my roommate just rolls his head over, and he looks at me, and he just says, "Oh, hell no." Like, oh no, this is how this is gonna be, huh? Oh man, I laugh every time I think about that, but luckily I haven't had any. I might have had one other experience that I can't even really remember, but yeah, I've kind of lucked out. I know some people, it's like a recurring thing; they have it all the time, and
yeah, some people suffer a lot from it.
Do you have any feelings about why that may be? Is that kind of like, our nightmares come to us in an attempt for us to face something typically? I don't know if I can truthfully say that's true for all cases, but is sleep paralysis kind of the same thing? Is there a reason why, like, do you feel like there's a reason why maybe people are more predisposed, or that it's trying to pull something out of them, or
I think there's layers of it, and some of it's, I think, biological, and some of it's psychological. Some people get sleep paralysis as a symptom of a larger sleep disorder, like sleep apnea, or narcolepsy. And so folks with narcolepsy suffer a lot with sleep paralysis. It's something they know quite intimately, because the sleep staging is getting kind of disturbed, and what you're experiencing is you're experiencing REM paralysis, muscle paralysis,
even after you've woken up,
while consciously awake. And so it's essentially like the body is asleep and the mind is awake, if you use that as a metaphor. It's close enough anyway to kind of get a grasp on it. But then isolated sleep paralysis is something that sounds like you experience, once in a blue moon. And for me as well, although for me it was repetitive, isolated sleep paralysis, but that is not tied to a known sleep, disorder, but rather has these tells, these things that can sort of work together to create it. And basically it comes down to sleep hygiene, diet, and on the psychological side, anxiety, right? Fear, and then there's all kinds of other indicators like PTSD and things like that. So and all kinds of sociological concerns as well, like women of color are more likely to experience sleep paralysis really than any other demographic in the United States. Wow. And why is that? And there's a lot of sociological reasons for that, because they feel unsafe, right? And so And so all this kind of wraps around to say that we've all got a sort of a unique profile when it comes to the likelihood of having sleep paralysis. And for most people who have it, it's sort of like your case. It's like it happened once in college, or something like that. And it's related to, I'm not saying this is true in your case, but maybe, there was a lot of alcohol. There could have been a lot of caffeine at a weird time, disruptions in sleep, stress about a test. There's just all that stuff is happening. Yeah. So college students have huge prevalence rates for sleep paralysis.
Okay.
It's massive. Yeah, it's massive. And folks who have jobs where they're shifting up their sleep schedule, so they're on different kinds of swing shifts, like nurses. The prevalence rate for nurses is off the charts for sleep paralysis. And anyhow, yeah. So for me, I think it has come and gone as a factor of my anxiety and of my sleep and my my general life. How much caffeine and alcohol was in my system when I was in my 20s. But it started way before then, right? It was just it showed up. It showed up when I was 12. And of course, the hardest part about it is that no one wanted to hear my story, right? It scared people. They, and of course, my family didn't want to hear about it. They're like, oh, I hope he's not,
possessed.
Yeah. We've got a lot. How many taboos? There's so many taboos that we just are forced to confront when it comes to these particular form of night night maladies. And so, but yeah, that piece that question you asked about, what's not so much the lesson, but what, why do they come and how do we work with them? They can be worked as a dream can, or as a nightmare can, because there are opportunities to face the shadow. There are opportunities to face fear and uncertainty and mystery. And for me, it's been an initiation into courage and self-acceptance, beyond that. What's the scariest thing that can happen, and facing that. So deep existential kind of questions that start emerging. But when this was 12 and I happened, it was so there is some kind of hellish entity, because I've met it now. I've experienced, I have a relationship with this, and I don't even believe in God. This is me as a 12-year-old. I'm the kid that quit Cub Scouts because I didn't want to lie when I put my hand on the Bible during the meetings.
Do they really do that? I don't remember that from Cub Scouts.
Oh, dude, I'm from Georgia. I forgot to tell you that.
Oh, okay.
The Bible had was front and center in Cub Scouts. It's a big piece. God, God and country with an extra heaping of God. Was the way that worked. Extra God. Yeah. Yeah. And in my atheism, it wasn't like it was strongly reasoned or anything. I'm pretty sure 80% of it was because I once stole a candy bar and my mother asked me if I stole it, and I said, no, absolutely not. And she made me put my hand on the Bible and swear. And how I dealt with that was disavowing God before I lied. So that was it for me and God for about 15 years.
Oh, that is hilarious. That's one way to get out of it.
Right. Anyway, this is just to say that, these nightmares, right? They bring up just the most intense existential questions that anyone can have, and you can't skirt it. It's just, you're looking right at it. Like, what is evil, and how does one confront it? And what is the attitude that one has when confronting pure evil? And how do you work with that?
Wow. Well, man, that's huge, dude. And that just seems to like make your initial comments about how you focused on love seem so powerful for that kind of encounter, to try to channel love in a pure way in the face of such dismal darkness, and to have it dissipate it. I mean, that's
it. And this is something that, people can find what's true for them. But what is the ground? What is the lucid ground that I need, that I must rest upon? What is the surest thing that I know? And love is, it's a tough word, right? But underneath all of those layers, there's something real.
Yeah.
And so that was it. That was when it began. And I was having regular nightmares too, as an adolescent has, along with a lot of fun flying dreams and really social dreams. I was just looking at my dream journal from high school before we got on the air, and just noticing like how many dream figures are in each dream. I mean, it's just so socially intense. There's like people coming and going. It's just this huge network of people, so much more social than my dreams are today.
Yeah. I started doing my dream journal when I was 19. That's when I got into dream work. Man, to think of, I love looking back on my 20s and seeing how different my dreams were now that I'm in my late 30s. But man, I can't even imagine if I had like journals worth of teenage dreams. Like, that would be so interesting to look back on that. I only remember like a handful from my teenage years, and they were all like surrounding my fear of intimacy with women. I had quite a few very wild dreams before I ever had sex of what the experience would be like, and they were all like very terrifying experiences in the dream.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah, dreams really, they're sort of testing the waters.
Yeah. I'm like, I hope this isn't what it's like.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
I had my first orgasm in a dream before I did like in real life. Like, that's, when I think about that and say that out loud, did I say that out loud? I have to wonder about, like, wow, dreaming really is this amazing, Jeremy Taylor would say it's this workshop of evolution, for personal evolution and maybe collective evolution. And I strongly agree. It's this really intense world that's playful and dramatic. And again, I come back to children when I think about it, because I spent a lot of time on the playground in the last 2 years doing co-oping. And, adults, I think they don't know what play really is. And I think that they don't really understand, most of us, what like playground play is like, because it is intense.
Yeah.
Like, there's this girl who is like always taking people to jail. Like, she's always like rounding up a posse, and whoever's new in the group, sometimes it's an adult, sometimes a kid, like rounds up the posse, brings them in. This kid goes to jail. It's like underneath like the slide and whatnot, and like keeps them there until some adult intervenes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the things that the kids play there, it's very existential. It's all of the things that we wrestle with as adults. Power dynamics and gender and power and race and life and death and it's all there. Like, play is amazing because it's light and simultaneously really deep.
Yeah.
And so it's that spirit of play that dreaming, lives in. And I think that's something that Kelly Bulkley has really articulated well over the last 15 or 20 years, is that, gosh, if there's anything that dreams are, they're play, but in a sacred way, not in a light way. Yeah.
Yeah, man. That I've never actually, I've always thought of like children's imagination and like, I've even thought about it like this, but after what you just said, it just gave me this whole new like way of looking at it. Whereas like, I've kind of felt like, kids' imagination is almost like the unconscious is a little bit more, they're more in tune with it and it just kind of flows through them. And they are, like you just said, they're acting out like these wild, really intense like narratives in their play. But
it's cosmic drama.
Yeah, exactly. But when you just said that, I was like, oh my God, it's like their play is like what we would go to for like a dream theater workshop or something like that. Like, and they just do it without thinking about it. It's like,
that's the world they live in.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are, we get in a circle, try to do dream reenactment, and we have to really be really pulled into the circle to like actually care to even try to like go there with it. Oh man. When I was at the conference this summer, I sat in, Linda Schiller had a dream theater thing that she did, and it was amazing. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that with a group, and it was really, really cool. But yeah, like she'd be like, all right, I need people up here, and like all of us would like look around and like, is it going to be me? Is it going to be you? Who's going to be brave enough to stand up first? Yeah, it's so wild. I really like that way of looking at it.
Yeah. And what comes up for me thinking about this is like what makes play special so that we can reenact these cosmic dramas is that it's safe. It's a safe place. Like no one's going to get hurt.
Right.
We can ease our boundaries because there's a larger circle where those boundaries are being held. And it's in a very corporeal sense for children. They're being held by watchful adults that are allowing them to engage in this sacred rite and to be in that mind space and not have to worry about anything else, just be in their imagination. And that's what dreams do, right? Yeah. And that's what like Linda's workshop does. Like she holds this boundary so we can move into it because it's about safety. And when I think about my relationship to dreams, like the big picture, like over the years, is that me coming to feel safe again, like to be safe, and to accept myself and to love myself.
Yeah, man, that's huge.
It's such good stuff. And for me, what was very impactful also as a child is that because of the bad babysitter, and you can capitalize that, the bad babysitter when I was 7 years old took me and his kid to go see E.T. in the theater, and that kind of puts a timestamp on where I'm at. But it was 1981. and E.T. was sold out. And so he pushed us into the theater next door, which was Poltergeist.
Oh, no.
So I saw Poltergeist in the theater as a 6-year-old, and it blew my little psyche to tiny little pieces. It was absolutely, it was like so traumatic. And that was one of those sort of watershed events where it's like, for a lot of what kind of, I look at the nightmare themes that occurred through my childhood, and that what I dealt with by the time I was a young adult had to do about repairing that sort of psychic blow of safety that I lost in that moment. And, I think I was probably 30 years old by the time that I saw that movie again, with support.
Yeah.
With friends I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to watch it. And it's a delightful film. I just it's actually, it's a bit of a farce. It's a weird movie because there's two directors sort of vying for a creative vision, and it's got a lot of Spielberg in it. But it's also got this real hard edge horror element that's not Spielberg at all. And I can't remember the name of the other director of Poltergeist, but essentially they sort of split the vision, and it creates this association. It's odd, but it's what makes the movie so potent as well.
Oh, wow. I guess I've never actually seen it in full, so I'm curious to go watch it now.
It really does hold up. It's got all kinds of tropes, it's like, for instance, the whole thing's on a Native American, quote unquote, cemetery. And that's where these, hellish entities come from, blah, blah, blah. It's, it got some, I think that may even be the beginning of the Hollywood trope there. But it's fantastic in the sense that it healed me to watch it because it's funny. It's a funny movie. It plays with this idea of horror. Spielberg somehow spun it in this strange way. And I was able to laugh at it and myself and be like, this is what caused me so much. You know what I mean? Really?
Oh, man. I think the movie that did that to me was The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. It's not even a horror movie, but the scene where the person sneaks into his house and kills his wife was so utterly terrifying to me. And I was at my friend's house across the street, and we just happened to be in the living room during that scene, and his parents weren't get the hell out of here, this isn't appropriate for you third graders to be watching. And I think that was probably the moment where that bit of safety was totally yanked from me, because I was that scene is so intense. And I think I can't remember any, but I would almost guarantee that I had nightmares for quite a while after that, of feeling like my house was not a safe place anymore. And so, man, and I'll watch that movie now, and same thing. As an adult, I can I can talk myself around it, but
and everyone's going to have a story like that, because at some point, the child has a realization that the world's not as safe as they thought it was.
Yeah,
and adults literally can't stop that realization from happening. And in fact, it would be weird if we could. They would no longer be functional adults.
Yeah.
Right? They would not become functional adults.
Right, exactly.
Not that that's an argument for traumatizing kids in third grade with The Fugitive.
Sit down, son. We're getting this over with now.
Right? Yeah. That's how you get into ancestral trauma, right? I think about that ancestral when it comes to for instance, you're a parent now. Have you had having to deal with, I've had I have this urge to show, my 7-year-old this Disney movie, I can't wait to show it to them. It's going to be awesome. I love this movie. And I have what I call the Criterion collection, which is a collection of VHS films. And so
Nice.
I crank up the VCR and put the cassette in, and it's like, yeah. And what happens? Well, all Disney movies start with trauma. It's just like,
yeah, exactly.
And it's usually the mother figure is ripped out of the film, and that's the initiation of the child into this like new world. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that.
Yeah.
And yet some piece of me didn't. And this is passing on. This is like generational trauma. It's like, it's the way it works. It's the way it works. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And who has time to preview a movie before you watch it with you? No one's got time for that.
I know. Yeah, there was something that I heard or I read a few years back that was saying something to that degree, because I think there was a period not too long ago where like I think a lot of people were realizing like how terrifying a lot of those cartoon movies that we grew up on really were. Like thinking about one of the initial scenes in Alice in Wonderland when she falls down the rabbit hole. Like I watched that when I was like in my mid-20s, and I was probably high at the moment, and was just like, this is actually a little terrifying. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh my God.
Like, I can't believe that like they show this to young kids. Like, there's quite a few movies like that where you're just
Watership Down.
Yeah.
Watership Down begins with this very intense psychedelic animated scene before it moves into the drama of the rabbits and the Warren, and it's such an intense film, and it's not a children's film. I mean, it's not. It's but it's animated, so we pretend that it. And this one came up for me recently. See, we're talking about dreams still, but we're talking about the dreams of Hollywood now. We're talking about cultural dreams. The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. The special. It's the Great Pumpkin. It was this thing I described earlier. I was like, I'm going to sit down and have my kids watch this. It's going to be a tradition. We rented the DVD from the library, and we watched it together. And I didn't know or remember because I had blacked it out. But in the middle of all this stuff with the Great Pumpkin is this really weird piece about World War I, where Snoopy is, an ace, and he's just machine gunning everything in sight. Wow. And then he's in occupied France, and he's like, going along barbed wire trenches and outsmarting the Germans, and Schroeder starts singing and playing these epic ballads from the 1914, 1915 that were these huge nationalistic, we will conquer all. It's a trip. It's a really crazy trip that's just right from the psyche of the greatest generation, just funneling straight down.
Oh, wow.
And it came out in the 60s. It came out in the middle of the Vietnam War. It came out, I think, 65. And apparently when it came out, it claimed a third of the TVs in America watched that special. And so, the veterans, they're in their 60s and 70s watching their PTSD play out in front of them.
Oh, no.
And so this is the thing is, like, we watched it and I said, well, guys, I didn't think I'd have to do this, but I guess we're going to have to talk about that. And then they asked some questions. And what am I doing? I'm explaining what trench warfare is.
Oh my God.
Well, you see the barbed wire. Well, you see the front. Anyway, it's a bad scene. That was not my intention.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well,
So
before I
this is the
forget
problem
this,
when you have That's the problem when you have
Yeah.
other people dream for you, is that you get this collective trauma that just funnels its way in.
Wow. Well, there was, I forgot to finish my thought. I don't know. I don't even know how I feel about this, but I think I'd read somewhere that kid shows should have, I mean, that if there isn't a hard conflict of some nature, that it's unbelievable, just out of human nature, that if there isn't that thing to rise above or that thing to confront, that somehow, some way, even a child doesn't believe it,
Right.
So it's like a really peculiar thing, because it's like, well, because there are a lot of like shows when my son was real small that, it's okay, I guess, but I don't know, it seemed kind of hokey and just kind of neutered in that way, where I don't even know how to explain it, but at the same time, like, do I think that my kid should be subjected to all the torture of going down the rabbit hole?
Yeah,
it's kind of like I don't know.
Well, that's I guess that's the narrative structure of how we tell stories. That's the
hero's
maybe
journey.
That's the monomyth. And it is really weird when you think about it. But even toddlers, they have conflict, and half of what nursery school is about these brilliant educators putting children in situations where conflict naturally arises. Like, they're not trying to keep kids separated so there's no conflict. They create situations where conflict naturally arises, which is simple, because if you get 5 humans, sitting around, and you put a basket of toys in the middle, they're going to start playing, and then conflict's going to arise.
Exactly.
And then they wait for conflict to arise, and then they mitigate it. And like, that's what early education is creating structured conflict that's age appropriate, and then dealing with it. And so they learn. Wow. And so, yeah, it's there. It's totally there from the very beginning. And I think about lucid dreaming, I think so many folks who want to learn how to lucid dream, they don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear this, but if you start getting into dreams, you're going to find conflict.
Yeah.
Because
thank you.
You're in the narrative. You are in the myth. This is it. This is what we do. We workshop this. We play with this. It's just gods and goddesses swirling around, and we're one of them. And folks get into lucid dreaming with this, thanks to marketing, with this idea of like virtual reality or controlling the dream, and they quickly find out that doesn't really work very well. And you can maybe have a couple of short dreams where you control things, and then what happens is the dream emerges. And how does one handle that? How does one deal with the spontaneity that comes up in the moment? The dream's response. What is the dreamer going to do next? Because if you keep trying to control things, you just become a puppeteer. And I'm convinced this is why there's so many beginner lucid dreamers and so few advanced ones, is because they don't make it through that initiation.
Yes, dude. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for saying all of that. That's like everything I've ever wanted to say and just didn't know how to say it properly. Damn, dude.
And it's nobody's fault. It's just, we need guidance. We need mentors. And some of those mentors come out of the dream, but some of them are in consensual reality, and dream positivity, like creating opportunities to be there for people, is how we can help them work through their myths and their narratives, and transform and not be heroes all the time. You know what I mean? Like, you're not the hero, you're not the savior. Like, there's other ways to be.
Yeah. Well, there's something that I've said too along the same line, where I've said to many people, like, lucid dreaming is a marketer's biggest wet dream. Like, I mean, they can basically tell you that you can do anything you want, and it just I think it sets people up with the wrong intention or like expectation of exactly what happens in there. Because I mean, like you said, like, I've had plenty of dreams where, like, the dream humored me, the unconscious let me, kind of be a little ridiculous and do silly things, and think that I'm wowing my dream characters with my magical abilities. But there's a certain point where, like, it's like, no, okay, well, that was cute for a few minutes there, but now if you really want to go farther with this, here's your first test. We're gonna put this to you, and you're gonna squirm like hell, but if you can find your way through this, then you get to play the game a little longer. And yeah, so I just love the fact that you brought that to awareness, because I don't hear a whole lot of that kind of talk in the lucid dreaming community, and I think it's so important, because as much as it maybe dampens people's like excitement to hear that you're going to be put to the test, or like maybe control is just as much an illusion in the dream state as it is in your waking life. People probably don't want to hear that right off the bat, but
people definitely don't want to hear it.
But God, there's
and a lot of it has to do with toxic masculinity, by the way, because statistically, women are better dreamers, have better dream recall, are more prolific lucid dreamers, period. And it's cultural and all the other layers. It's the marketing of lucid dreaming, and it targets the immature male who's looking for power.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have power in his life yet, and he's questing for power. And there's nothing wrong with questing for power, but it is an immature archetype, right? And so, I mean, that's just it's nasty. It's just nasty, and it doesn't matter how many times you say it out loud, because it keeps coming back up, because it's in the air we breathe. It's just in the culture. Yeah. It's colonialism. It's manifest destiny. It's white supremacy. It's just it's patriarchy. It's all of the things get moved into like this nature of. That's why there's all these debates about control. Like, why are we talking about control again?
Yeah.
Why? Because that's not what makes a lucid dream so fantastic and amazing. It's the awareness, and it's the spontaneity, and interacting with this autonomous wisdom and intelligence, and or whatever is happening, however you want to frame it. It's that which we don't control, which makes the lucid dream so powerful and so impactful.
Yeah, I'm curious if this is the case for you, since we're kind of on this vein. I've had a lot of lucid dreams where, like the big ones that I've had that really opened a whole new thing for me. It seemed like each of those lucid dreams, there was like some form of like an inborn test. And it was like, depending on how I responded to this, kind of what we were just saying, the conflict, dictated whether, I guess, what size of reward we'll say I got. So if my ego just decided it was just taking over and it was like, this is my dream and I'm going to do what I want, then, I got little bitty reward. I got the unfulfilling thing that happened that I thought that I wanted. But if I saw the opportunity there to humor what the dream was trying to do to pull something deeper out of me, then it has opened into such a beautiful beautiful offering. I mean, one of the examples that I had is a story that I told in one of our previous episodes about the initiation that was spawned by a lucid dream. And in that, when I became lucid, there was this person who was playing this instrument that I had just come across on the internet a few days before that. And I was like, oh my God, there it is. And I asked the dream character, I was like, hey, can I play that real quick? And he cocks his head back and he laughs and he goes, if you want to play this instrument, you got to go talk to that guy. And he points across the room and there's this solitary man sitting down at a table. And as much as this doesn't look like a test, it kind of is, because I could have very easily, and in many of my initial lucid dreams when I was younger, this is totally how I would have operated, because I was under the same assumption that this is my dream. I do what I want. I'm lucid. I get to control whatever I, blah, 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 blah. And the dream ego just has a field day. And so back in the day, I would have been like, no, screw you. Give me the damn instrument. This is my dream. You listen to me. This is my shit. And I would have taken it. But the fact that I went, and I stood back and was like, wait a minute. The dream is pointing me in a different direction here. So why? Why did that just happen? He didn't have to say that. He could have handed it to me. But the fact that he's directing me somewhere else now has me curious, and I don't even care about the instrument. And that ability to flow with the dream, or to allow myself to be directed by it. I mean, I was given a directive on how to come into my power. Yes. And I went through this. I mean, I'm still in the middle of it. And this was in 2015. I'm still in the thick of this whole initiation that this dream initiated for me. And I mean, like I said, had I thought that I knew better, I would have never gone to the table. My whole life would be different. And it's such a simple thing that happened there, but at the same time, it had monumental consequences for my life. That's it. It's such a cool story. It just lays it out. This is an initiation. That figure was a guardian, and you had a choice. And if it was my dream, the dreamer's choice was to surrender, to listen, to be directed. And that's when something new is revealed. You get to go a step further in. You get to, to learn rather than take, right? Exactly. Yeah. So it's changing. Hillman, Hillman would talk about how it's the energy of Ulysses in the underworld, rather than Hercules, of going down to the underworld to listen rather than to take. That's it. You described it to a T. And we have these moments all the time, and of course we have them in waking life too. Right. It's what makes dreams so interesting, because it's the theater of the mind, and you can really just watch it play out in such a beautiful way. And so that's it. We have all these initiations. We have all these opportunities, and we fail initiations left and right, and which is actually okay, because it would be weird if we didn't. Yeah, I got a story of that too. It'd be weird if you just
if you just like just move through life, like it's weird. Conflict is how we learn. Failure is how we step it up and redirect.
So I want to know, I mean, I guess real quick, could you answer, have you had that kind of experience in lucid dreams where it feels like there's, especially in like the big ones you've had that have like been more pivotal for you? Has there been kind of like a moment where you could have made a choice one way or the other depending on how you reacted?
Yeah. I mean, so many of them. It's interesting. I haven't thought about this dream in a really long time, but I had a dream once where, and it was a lucid dream in which there was a stairwell going up into this, leading up to this beautiful sort of ivory castle in the sky, basically.
Wow.
And there was also a small, like, wood-clad, almost like shack on the ground level, kind of depressed a little bit into the earth. And I had a choice about which one to go to. And I knew I was dreaming, and I knew I wanted to go up to the beautiful castle. And I made the decision not to. And I made a decision to stay on the ground. And what happened is I started moving towards this structure, is I began getting mired in briars. Suddenly there was briars, and I'm like my feet are getting kind of stuck in them, and I'm having to crawl under something else, detritus that's in the way. And in my left hand, I realize I have a suitcase, and it gets stuck. And I realize I have to let go of the suitcase to continue.
Oh, man.
And so I do, and I'm able to let go of my baggage and move forward into the next stage of the dream.
Wow.
And the dream goes on, and the thing is that, yeah, it's just these themes continue throughout my life of moving into the underworld, moving downward into the steps. And it's real, a real space when you start moving down the steps and the air gets cold.
Yeah.
This is not expectation working itself out. You know what I mean? This is not lucid expectations creating scenarios. This is an archetypal landscape.
Oh, man.
And so, yeah, anyway, that's an example of a choice that I feel that was it the right choice? I don't know, but it was a choice that I made. And I think it kind of sums up my life, which is a bit of a mess, but it's grounded.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I would have gone for the castle in the sky. And because when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, and when I was having a lucid dream every day, if not every other day, and it was just this huge, crazy spiritual opening, I was always I felt like I was on some kind of like fast track to enlightenment. I thought, I was heading to oblivion. Scott Sparrow talks about this too, about young adults, and just there's this frenetic race that happens as the mind opens up, and at the same time, when there's all this light and all of this spaciousness, there's a lot of sort of bypassing going on.
Yeah.
A lot of bypassing. And what I feel like I've been working with for the last 20 years is staying put, not being as flighty.
Yeah.
And listening and waiting, and and it's painful sometimes, and it's not comfortable at all, but that's the path I took.
Wow, man. Yeah, I love that imagery, because it does feel like I think most people would see the lofty place in the sky and be like, ooh. But I think especially here, I think it's purposefully supposed to look more alluring, but I think it's kind of an empty allurement, if that makes sense. It definitely shows you kind of where you're at. And it's
the known,
right.
It's that's the house of expectation right there.
Yeah. And then I think it's, I'm sure Robert Bly said it too, but I think Michael Meade also says this, that the place of the soul is down and wet, or something like that. Like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are the conditions of the soul. So downward is a motion downward and wet.
Yes, that's it. That's the moist man.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what he's talking about there. That's Iron John.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and which is the quest for healing. The quest for not to be the hero, but to face the wound, right?
Yeah,
to face
absolutely.
what is that primal wound, Bly said something about how initiation is about a safe place to dip the wound into the sacred pool with the help of a mentor.
Yeah.
And that's what's required. Those are the prerequisites for that to happen. And that's a lot. Our society isn't really set up like that. It's hard to find a mentor.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hard to find someone who's been here before.
Yeah, man. I think dreams kind of act as that also. They can. And yeah, they can be huge allies in that regard. So since we're on this vein, I'm so glad we're here, because I think in our initial conversation with each other, you had mentioned that, I don't know if you used the words core wound or not. I can't remember if I'm remembering this correctly or not, but it seemed like within the scope of your lucid dreaming that you were on kind of a path of healing through them. Wondering if we can hear some of that story. Where is that?
Yeah, I feel like we've been dancing around that, right?
Right, exactly. Let's go there.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the big picture for me with my dream life, which is not just about lucid dreams at all, but all of the big themes of my dreams have to do about self-acceptance and finding safety and security and power. And when those prerequisites are met, I enter a sacred space. I enter a sacred grove the land, right? The land becomes liminal. The space becomes liminal. And that's where contact with the autonomous other occurs. That's where I receive information and have conversations and get energetic downloads from ancestors and from wise figures. And this is not something that happens every day. This is the dream that happens every 10 years.
Right.
Right. When you look at the big picture of, I've been journaling for 40 years, my dreams, what's happening here. And all of those themes of safety and security, they were just what had to be healed in order for me to enter this moment of love and abundance, to be open to listen. And that's what it's about for me. That's what the dream life is about. That's what my work, oddly enough, as an archaeologist, what I took away from that was learning about emotional landscapes and how much they matter, and how important it is to create sacred space and maintain it. And maintaining sacred space for others is the gift I was given by moving through this process.
Wow.
And that's it. That's what lucid dreaming has been about for me. And it was horror and a shitstorm all the way along the way. And now, it's a different era. Now my heart resides outside my body. I have children. So the existential threat is very different now than it used to be. My concerns have shifted. And I don't seek lucidity like I used to. I just let it come to me.
Yeah.
And that's fine because it's kind of intense. And I seriously, I'm looking back, I have right in front of me this list of lucid dreams I had when I was 20 years old. And there's an entry every single day or every other day. I mean, oh my Lord, I would not be okay with that right now.
It's funny, man. Yeah, that was how my 20s were too. I mean, it wasn't every day for me, but I was having at least 6 or 7 a month, and on an average, and then would have up to 12 or 13, I think, on good months. And I think about that now, and I'm like, man, currently right now, I'm in it's been almost 2 years since I've had even a fleeting lucid dream. I'm in a really big drought right now. And this last year, they've been trying to get me to figure out how to get back into it. It's hard with dad life and
yes,
a bunch of other stuff I got going on. And yeah, it seems like they're priming me for something.
Dad life is about, you don't need to go on any additional journeys right now. You don't need to be looking for trouble right now if it were my dream. Do you know what I'm saying? There's enough shit in your life right now.
That's funny, man.
Early childhood, you are in the shit. It is visceral. That is enough. We can put our burdens down at night and please let us rest.
Yeah.
Let me rest. Let me just let my bones just slip into forgetfulness. I'm fine with that one. So when dreams come, when the lucidity comes, I welcome it. But I don't have that heroic need to expand it, and conquer it and move through it. And, but yeah, yeah, it's so different. But the initiations continue. It's not like I'm done. Like, because there's no done. Like, yeah, there's no done.
So let me ask you this. What were you going to say? What were you just going to say?
I was going to say, I had a dream that came to mind.
Let's roll with it.
All right. Yeah. So one of the repetitive dream themes in my life has to do with about physical conflict. It has to do with bullying, and it has to do with running from the bullies, right? Sort of classic adolescent nightmare territory that continued into my young adulthood. And there was a dream that I had that was on this theme. And what I usually do, right? What I usually do is when the bullies show up is that I run the other way. I defenestrate myself if necessary. I will crawl through a window to get away from the bullies. And what do? I'll try to fly away. I'll use the power of flight to resist, resistance. And what happens? I end up flying into power lines or tree branches, or you become ensnarled, right? This is the classic lucid dreamer's dilemma. What do you do in that situation? You turn around, right? You turn around and face it. And of course, it takes this like repetitive nature of nightmares to be like, did you get the lesson yet? Right. And it's like, okay. So this one time I got the lesson, and I remembered, and the dream started with where they were throwing nails at me. They were literally throwing nails at me. A group of boys, and I ran, and then I came to, and I turned around, and I faced the ringleader, and I was just there for it. And he hated me. It was just pure maliciousness. And I was terrified, and I stayed put. And we walked together, and we sat down at a bench, and he's still, even though he's sitting next to me, he's just brimming over with hatred. And I realized that he'll never accept me for who I am. Like, it'll never happen. Like, I'll never be able to make peace with this hatred. And I just decide to love him anyway.
Wow.
And so I just love him. And this is the way that it is. And I didn't say those words. They just, the way that it is with dreams, sometimes it's non-vocal. And I look over at him, and he's sweating. He's just almost tremoring with sweat. And then I suddenly have the urge to throw up. And I do. I throw up. I vomit all over myself in the dream. I'm just covered in it, in this terrible, noxious liquid. And as this happens, I look over to him, and it's like he's suddenly shimmering and relaxed and peaceful.
Wow.
And I realize that he got it, that I'm not going to hate him. And he felt accepted. And he realized that he could be here with me, and that we could do our thing and be here. And I woke up with that. I woke up with this exuberance. Wow. Like a weight had been lifted.
Man, that's a beautiful dream. So, when you wake up from a dream like this, how do you feel? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel what is the quality?
Yeah. I remember I felt buoyed for days after that dream. And I can't say it was the last time I had the dream about the bullies. I really don't remember, but it's not really a part of my scene anymore. You know, it phased out.
Yeah.
And that was part of it. That was part of it.
Wow,
there's this radical love, and it's got to be radical love, not not yeah.
There can't be any pussyfooting
Radical love
about
is it's something else, and it's divine, is what it is, and
unconditional, I guess you could say.
It requires faith. It requires some kind of understanding that something bigger than I understand has got my back.
Yeah.
That I'm part of something bigger. And that I don't necessarily even matter to an extent. That it's not about me.
Wow.
So that was all that came out of that.
I like the purging aspect of this dream. I think that, because I mean, if he is a part of you potentially, and you purge, I mean, just like my initial thoughts were, if this was my dream, that like I'm purging, especially since he's sparkly afterwards, it seems like I'm purging that part of myself that, whether or not I recognize it in me or not, that capacity to just hold grudges or hate people for little to no reason.
That feels right.
Yeah, purging that and just feeling, I mean, just being buoyed like that. I mean, fuck, man, that just feels like a huge release, and like a very edifying moment of moving deeper into your own heart and your own sense of self-acceptance. For sure. Wow.
And that's it. And that's the beauty of lucidity. In the sense, it's about using the ability to make choices to get out of the way, and not make the choice in the spirit of resistance or the pursuit of pleasure or all these sort of egoic things, but to sit in the muck and to just learn to
crawl
be
through the briars.
To crawl through the briars.
Yeah, man.
Which is something, as an archaeologist, that I used to have to do. We had to literally, create transects through the briars. I remember one time in this terrible, terrible job where I was just caught up in the briars, and I literally got so caught up in the briars that I just let all my muscles relax, and I just was hanging there with my arms out, just being held aloft by all the briars. But it was a blackberry briar patch. And so I just sat and ate blackberries for a while and rested. And then when I had the strength to move on, I plowed further.
Oh, man. What a cool waking dream. Oh, man. Yeah, that's cool. I'm curious if it's the same for you. So I think this last fall was 17 years for me doing lucid dreaming. There's been a clear evolution in how I've confronted nightmares over the last almost 2 decades. Whereas initially it was very empowering to attempt to maybe vanquish the nightmarish figure. Like I remember one time the Mothman was chasing after me and I find this nice big tree trunk to hide behind, and so he's pursuing me in the dream before I become lucid, and I can't run to save my life. It's one of those awful dreams where it's like you're running in quicksand. And so I'm sitting there screaming at the top of my lungs, like, why the hell can I not run? And finally it just leads to that moment where you're like, oh my God, I'm dreaming. Thank you for this. And I zoomed up ahead, and he's way behind me now, and I gather myself together, and as I know he's getting closer, I jump out from behind the tree, and I put my hands up, and I imagine that I'm doing something that is going to make him disappear, and he does. And I wake up, kind of pat myself on the back, and I think at first those kind of experiences are empowering because
Yes.
You have to,
Yes.
especially, I mean, I really resonate with the whole bully situation with you. That was a big part of my story too. I mean, moving so much as a kid, was constantly the victim of bullying and feeling like I was the odd man out. And that's so much a part of my story too. And, being a people pleaser was a very safe way for me to make friends quickly when I found myself in a new situation. And so I ended up being a floor mat and a pushover, and a lot of my nightmares have very aggressive, very domineering characters because that's how I've always perceived people. And so I think initially it was empowering for me to stand up against these people because it's unlike anything I'd done. And so it was powerful, but like we've said a few times here tonight, eventually it's not good enough. It's to get to the next level of things.
Right.
The dream is expecting more of us. And
yeah.
So I'm curious, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. It's similar. And I think that
I guess because to add on to that, so eventually I did get to the point, I have a few dreams that I could share that are very similar to the one that you just shared about embracing and that level of acceptance. So, how did you get to that point, I guess, is maybe the more pointed question.
Yeah, so one of the first times that I stood up to a lucid nightmare was as a teenager, being 14 or 15. And it was a monster that was coming out of the television set. And so this imagery is sponsored by Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is Poltergeist again. And then it's larger, television as a metaphor that we've been talking about tonight. But yeah, so the seething kind of tentacle-y monster comes out of the television and to attack me, and I become lucid and I face it and I just say no, just with this power of no, of making a boundary, and it sucked right back in and went away. And that was, they call, I think about that in existential language as the no of Nietzsche. There's this it's developed, it's psychological development, it's maturity, setting a boundary. You have to know, it's the pre-trans fallacy too. You have to set a boundary and know how to set them before later in life you can release them to let yourself get hurt a little bit, to learn a little more. You have to know how to put a sacred circle around you first. You have to learn that. But like you say, that's the first level. That's the first initiation. And it's harder. The initiations after that are more subtle and variable, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So saying no is the first power of the lucid dream. And that is developmentally appropriate for 15 years old, for an adolescent and a young adult coming into their power and coming into the power of their voice.
Yes.
Speaking their truth. standing up for themselves. Like, we need to do that. We need to do that.
Yeah, and what a beautiful way that the dream offers that safe space for us. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about it to me, is that it really creates this beautiful, safe container for us to have these really beautiful moments where we can have these huge, very edifying experiences that are just as intense, if not more intense in some cases, than what you would experience in waking life. I mean, there's definitely, the fear is real. The challenge is just as steep in some cases. It feels like, but it's kind of like what you were saying earlier. Like, the dream creates this safe place where we can engage the conflict and know that within this space we're safe, and to be offered these very personal, deeply edifying experiences. I just think it's such a remarkable thing that we have access to.
It is, and and of course sometimes that safety is broken, and it's broken by trauma. And so it's not always a guarantee. And once again, like thinking about what Robert Bly, about initiation in the presence of mentors, and that healing, we need help, and so sometimes those mentors come in the dreams, and sometimes we need to seek them in waking life to help us through these processes, to get into balance, till we are safe enough to either slay that monster or befriend it, or whatever kind of stage of development that you're at and what needs to be done.
Yeah, I like that. I guess just to put a bow on this part, do you have a dream that was kind of a lucid dream that was your upgrade to the next level of confronting your nightmares? Do you know which dream that was that that you did? Was it the one that you just told, or was it a different one that got you to that next level?
Well, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, I know.
Fortunately or unfortunately. I went through a really massive healing cycle when I was in grad school, supported by multiple mentors, which allowed me to move really deeply into my process. And I wrote a master's thesis about lucid dreaming and that details that process, which I called spontaneous emergence. And the injunction, what I was attempting to do through a series of lucid dreams that I incubated, was to enter a dream, to become lucid in the dream, and to remember my intention to slip out of the dream scene and enter the void, the lucid void, either by going through a wall or a mirror or through the floor, whatever process was easiest to discard the dream body, to emerge in the dark space of the void, and from there enter into a meditation, a phenomenological meditation of waiting to see what happens next, to watch and be with the process of reemergence in the dream. Because what happens for me in these dreams, is what happened is that after a while, I would recrystallize, the dream body reemerges into a dream. Sometimes a lucid dream, sometimes not. And I was in meditation attempting as far as much as possible to not have an intention. Or if I had an intention, to make it known and to discard it, to set it aside. as one does in meditation, as one does in the Western philosophical practice of phenomenology. And that was that was my protocol. And I resulted with a handful of dreams in which I succeeded in the protocol. And then I analyzed the scripts through a narrative method to look at what did reemergence look like. And often, about a third of the time, reemergence was a childhood scene.
Wow.
So I would enter into a childlike body in, the home I grew up in, or a school, or something derived from that. And then after I emerged, the scene would emerge first. I would feel it before I could see it. I could literally feel the structure of the architecture first.
Wow.
And then the dream body would emerge, and the dream scene would stabilize, and then dream characters would enter in general. Sometimes they're there to begin with, but often they're like in the next room, or they take a little while to kind of like enter the scene. And then I would basically try to do this sort of participant observation, like an anthropologist, not, because you can't really witness so much as participate as you show up. And that was my protocol. That was my method. It was super intense. And basically what it showed for me is that this is a really awesome method for coming into contact with core wounds. And I do not recommend it as like, here's my 3-step method. No, that's not what this is. I had this superlative social support at this time. I had mentors, I had people I could talk to. I had people who've been through this before. And when I got over my head, because I did get over my head, I had folks who helped me. And in fact, at one point, I encountered enough psychological material that was difficult that I went into a digestive flare-up with my whole digestive system essentially liquidated. And
wow.
Let's go back to purging. Fun stuff. But I had to start fasting.
Wow.
I had to start fasting. That was the only thing that could break what was happening to me. I could literally not digest what was in front of me.
Holy cow.
I could not handle it. And so after I fasted for a few days, I had a dream. And the dream showed me something very clear that was sort of not, I wouldn't say it a repressed memory, but it hinted at a trauma that I witnessed that I had forgotten about. So it is in the territory of repression.
Yeah.
And it had to do with witnessing as a child of a very dysfunctional family that I was friends with a dysfunctional and abusive and alcoholic father who was sexually molesting one of my friends.
Wow.
And it had to do with my powerlessness and inability and denial and naivety and all of those things, because I was 10.
Yeah.
And all of this material that came up was something that I was able to process in session later.
Wow, man.
And so again, this is not a 3-step method to like find your core wound, because I would never recommend that for anyone. But lucid dreaming has a power of healing, but it could also harm if those safeties are not in place.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just like psychotherapy. It's just like psychedelic therapy. You know, set and setting and parameters and boundaries and ritual space and all of the things that we know are important for healing to happen, to do deep work, are essential.
Yeah, man.
And so after I went through with this, and then kind of in much more really wonderful stuff came out of that process, involving other aspects, including like ancestral visitations and ancestral knowledge, and just like basically generational love and belonging that supported me through that power. So basically that period, that process was like a quickening for me.
Wow, man. Yeah, that's intense. It's so funny because I was actually going to ask you if you've had any dreams that, especially lucid ones, that had maybe given you an image of a core wound. And then you did it without me asking.
Yeah, and you know, this dream was very direct, but in which the girl was there telling me what happened in the dream. And while she was telling me, and she was so angry, it's, you know, I'm just covered in chills right now as I encounter the image, and she's so angry. And at the same time, a mountain lion is gnawing on my hand as she tells me this.
Oh, man.
Like, that's the image.
Yeah. Wow.
And so all of our powers are there. Yeah. It's a phenomenal process that I hope one day to understand.
Yeah, man. Yeah, see, I love this because I feel like I was absolutely called into lucid dreaming. It wasn't anything I was looking for. I had a spontaneous lucid dream when I was 19 that broke me wide open to it. I had no idea what lucid dreaming was. And so I feel very much so like that space has something for me, that it called me so strongly to be there, that it's just step by step guided me throughout my life to finding these kind of experiences, these core wounds, and, you know, offering me the ability to potentially heal them. That's kind of what this initiation that I've been through since 2015 is all about. And it's crazy because in 2009, I had a dream that, the way I look at that dream now is that it was an image, a very symbolic image of the core wound that I carry. And I've shared this in, I think, two of the episodes now, but just since we're on this topic, I'll just quickly share it again. I was, I'm sure you're familiar with it. I had the old, the Dream Nova mask. I had just bought it in Waking Life, and the dream was that I had it on, and I'm looking into the mask, but the mask itself is like this endless tunnel. And there's this classical music that's pouring forth from it, like from the other end of the tunnel all the way down to me. And it's so gorgeous, and it's so absolutely divine, and it just feels so wholesome. And then I take the mask off, and I'm in what I call, I name the dream the land of lucid torture. So the feeling and the beauty that came through the mask elevated me in such a way that I became lucid just out of happenstance. And when I took the mask off, was literally in hell. It was just the most putrid place I could ever imagine. And before me is this kind of carnival of sorts, and there's this metal gate, and just inside the gate you can see these different cages of some sort. And the only person that I am able to see, even though the scene is so horrific that I have to keep dodging my eyes from looking straight at it. It's like I can look real quick, but then it's so painful and the energy is so ishy in this dream that I have to look away. But there's a man who is being impaled by a tree. The tree is growing up behind him and impaling him basically through his solar plexus, and then the branches are sprouting out the front of him. He's in agonizing pain, just screaming, and he's this largely built man, and he's just rendered completely helpless by this wound. And if that wasn't worse, or worse enough, he was on fire at the same time. And it was this absolutely horrific. It was like the most horrific thing that I had ever seen. And I'm lucid, but I can't do anything about it. Like, there's no way to will it away. There's no way to send my love to heal it or change it. The energy is so thick, and it's almost like I'm being blocked from being able to do that because it's not time. It's not appropriate to do it. I'm being forced to stand in the fires, essentially, of this wound, and I have to know it. I have to feel it. There's no wishing it away. And at the very last minute, though, I am able to call rain, and I ask for it to rain, and it puts the fire out at least. But he's still has the tree growing through him. And so it wasn't until this initiation I've been going through, it was like, I think 2016, I was thinking back on that dream and being like, holy shit, like there's this energetic knot that I feel in my solar plexus that I've been nursing through the course of this. I mean, like I said, like that directive I was given in that lucid dream was to come into my power. And it was a very cryptic statement that I was given. Which is why it's taken me this long to get through this. It's so layered, and there's so much to it. And then the tree itself feels ancestral. I mean, it's like my family tree. It says core wound through my core, in my power, in my place of power. And it also feels collective. It feels like the world tree at the very same, because through this initiation, I discovered that my biggest fear is that I fear I'll never be worthy of my own love. And like that, oh man, there's so much to tell you, but yeah, so it's been such a hell of a journey. It's part of the directive was that there was like a dreaming element that had to be answered. And so something in my dreams, which felt like lucid dreams, had to be killed, and then something beautiful created in its place. And so they've been calling me this year. It feels like we're finally ready to start moving into that. And oh man.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that image.
Yeah, man.
And I don't know if this is true for you, but I wonder, do you have Scandinavian or Northern European ancestry?
I do, yeah. Mostly German. Not so much Scandinavian, but I do have a little Dutch. And there's like Irish in there. But the Germanic side of me tends in a lot of my ancestral dreams seems to be really highlighted. And I've had a lot of dreams with Odin, actually.
Well, that's just it. I mean, that's what's coming through for me. I'm glad you said it. I wrote it down as soon as you said it, but holy shit.
Yeah.
Ooh, hello, Odin. Welcome to the circle.
Oh, man.
Don't hurt me.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's been, and like you said, like I know earlier I said, yeah, there's like this unconditional safety in a lucid dream, but I think I have to retract that a little bit. Because especially when you start to move into these kind of areas within yourself, like
exactly,
there has to be more of a container created, and
right.
you almost
one can get hurt, and this is the whole. This is the whole truth that of the lucid nightmare. This is the whole truth behind it, and it doesn't have to be a PTSD dream to be a lucid nightmare. One can feel unsafe and stay in the dream, and one can be hurt. One can hurt. I have hurt myself throughout my lucid dreams, and there's plenty of other anecdotes, from other people that we know now. And it's the unpretty truth that the evangelists, the lucid evangelists, don't want us to say. But if it has the power to heal, it has the power to harm. We know this.
Yeah.
We know this. So tread carefully. Have support.
Yeah. Trust the process.
Don't go looking for trouble.
Right. Because I think something I could say to that is something that I've recognized very clearly is that if you become lucid within a nightmare, it seems to me that it's come to you, that it's time for you to face that or address it, and you do have those beautiful moments of potentially turning around, like we've said, and confronting it or embracing it. And it seems like the fact that the nightmare is there, it's top of mind in the psyche, and you have the opportunity before you to address that, and you can have a really beautiful experience. And I found that trying to pursue fears, like if I was just in a normal dream and I wanted to face fears, it was a little touchier. It was a little wasn't so readily available because maybe I wasn't ready, maybe it wasn't appropriate for me to seek that out. So it's funny. The reason why I started doing that was because I had a lucid dream where I did have a nightmare. I was being chased by these police-like characters. And finally, when I realized how absurd it seemed, I realized I was lucid, and I turned around and I was like, hey guys, like, what's going on, man? Let's talk about this. And they just like kind of melted away in the dream. And I tried to catch up to them and I couldn't catch up to them. They just kept evading me. And I walked by these people and they're like, hey, and I turned and I looked and the guy was like, while you're facing your demons, you should face your biggest one. And he rattled off this crazy name that I had to ask him to repeat it 3 times. And even on the 3rd time, I still couldn't even comprehend at all what the hell he just said. And it was funny. I was telling a friend of mine who was really big into D&D that, and he's like, that's actually really interesting because in most lore of like D&D and all that kind of stuff, like demons' names are almost completely unpronunciable.
Right.
Uh, and I was like, wow, that is really weird. That's not anything that I would have consciously in my head. So that was like really kind of neat. But that like got this thing, in my head where I was like, holy shit, yeah, I should try to go find my biggest fear. Like how
it's a party.
All the naivety there, not even considering exactly what I'm trying to walk into. And so the story that goes along with the directive I was given, has a lot to do with the victim. Like that core wound of feeling like I'll never be worthy of my own love. There's so much shame and so much victim energy surrounding all of that. And so I started trying to call the victim into a lucid dream, and found that was insanely difficult because I apparently have a lot more resistance to facing that than I would have thought. And man, the kind of fear that would arise in the dream as soon as I would even think about asking for the victim to show up to try to have a reconciliation moment with them, holy cow, it would unground the dream so incredibly that I would wake up. And so, yeah, it was, and I just continued to throw myself against that fear every time I would become lucid, and eventually it worked. But, there was a lot in my waking life that I still had to confront before that would be appropriate in the lucid state to have that really powerful moment. So there's a trust in the process that has to happen if you are trying to dig deeper into confronting some of these core wounds that we hold. And just take your time, like yeah, man.
It's not a naive trust. It has to be a grounded trust that this is possibly going to encounter something dangerous, and it wouldn't be worthwhile otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It wouldn't
I'm glad we can state that.
Scott Sparrow
out there.
Scott Sparrow says fear is the sign of a worthy adversary in the dream.
Yes.
Right. So fear is not to be feared or to be demolished or to be loved away necessarily. Yes. It's kind of panacea. It's a responsible thing to notice sometimes. This is bigger than me. This is unknown. And this is worthwhile. And it's worth the risk if all of these other safety precautions that we've talked about are met.
Yeah.
And, which is why for years I did not teach lucid dreaming. I wasn't even sure if it was ethical to do so. For years after graduate school, I was just like, I don't know. I see people teaching lucid dreaming, and I'm not sure if I can hold that. And how do you know that a person's not gonna get hurt? And so I developed a system, a lucid container. When I wrote my ebook, Lucid Immersion Guidebook, it involves all of these containers, everything that we've talked about today. It's basically like, these are the things you need to have in place if you want to do this work in a real way. And in a way, it's a save my ass type situation, but it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
Anybody can spend their life just flying around and doing whatever you want in a lucid dream, and that's fine. And then if you're called to go deeper, this is what you have to do.
I might have to read this. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Share notes. Oh, man.
And just as there's these spooky, terrible creatures in the dream, there's always also these mentors that show up. And sometimes they, like I have a mentor who shows up. I haven't seen him in years, but he only speaks Latin. And it's so aggravating.
Oh, I love it.
And I try to remember, and I really do, and I catch snippets of it. And I studied Latin in college, but it's all, I don't know it anymore in the sense, and in the dream, I don't know it. But it's the language; it's his preferred language, and so I have to kind of just get by.
Yeah.
But we have these figures, these wise figures who are there, and they show up at key moments. And they're there to witness and sometimes to assist. And sometimes just the witnessing is enough. The witnessing is enough to shift a dynamic. I had just a quick dream snippet where I had sort of a lucid nightmare situation going on. And I enter into a room, and I'm absolutely unsafe. And there's like an explosion going on, and everything is getting sucked out towards the bomb. And there's like a small, like kind of skeleton figure slinking around, kind of hidden in the corner of my eye, kind of like peripheral thing. It's something I experience sometimes in lucid dreams, and just kind of just keeps sneaking around, and at the exact moment I feel something beginning to nip or gnaw on my testicles, and so I'm getting really uncomfortable here in this dream. And I'm like, this is fucking scary. Excuse me. We'll edit that. This is scary. And I consider waking myself up. And then this old man shows up, and his face is half obscured by a hood. And he faces me directly, and he says something that really shook me. He says, "You think that you're heroes, but there have always been demons and those who fight against them." And I woke up.
Wow.
Oh, okay. It's just, how many more indications do I need? When one enters into, like, when one is like, this is a monomyth and we're the hero, well, guess what you're setting yourself up for if you're the hero?
Yeah, wow.
You're setting yourself up with dragons. Why must we always be? It's not the only myth. I love Campbell. I love Joseph Campbell, but please, there's other narrative structures.
Yeah, man.
There really are.
Oh, that's so funny. I love how, like, how dream characters always keep you on your toes like that, where they totally, they're very trickstery with their speech oftentimes. It's really funny. Like, I remember a friend of mine, when he found out that I was into lucid dreaming, was saying that he's like, "Oh, I had that happen one time," and our mutual friend Stefano was right there with him, and he was like, "Stefano, I'm dreaming." And he said, Stefano deadpan looked right at him, right in the eyes, and said, "How do you know you're not dreaming when you're awake?" And he said it just like made my whole sense of reality crumble, and I woke up just gasping, and I was like, yes.
Mic drop.
I know, exactly. Oh, man. It's too funny.
No, that's it. I love, what Robert Moss says about we should take our dreams more seriously, and we should take our lives more figuratively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's the waking dream.
Yeah, man. Yes, it is. So to wrap this up with you, Ryan, really appreciate, Jesus, I had no idea where we were going when we walked into this call. I had some ideas where I was hoping it would go, but man, we covered a lot of ground. I just to, kind of wrap this up real nice. If you had a way of what or how these dreams or your lucid dreams in general, just the process of, walking your path with dreams, if you could say how that has shaped you, what would that sound like?
I feel very fortunate to have my dreams to help me find my voice, discover my power, heal, and learn how to hold space for others. And I am confident that I would not be who I am today if I wouldn't have had that opportunity. It's just such a gift, such a blessing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I tell people all the time, like, I can't even reconcile who I might have been had dreams not just grabbed me by the shoulders and been like, let's go. I mean, can you even imagine, like, where you would be?
Yeah, I'd be writing marketing copy for Doritos or something.
Oh, no.
I know exactly where I'd be. I am so happy to be in a cold basement discussing my dreams with you right now.
Yeah, listeners, when we first got on, we were both chuckling that we're both in our basements all bundled up because we're freezing our asses off down here trying to do this while our family is upstairs sleeping. Oh, man. That's funny.
Just keeping it real, man. Keeping it grounded.
Exactly. Down and wet. Yeah, man. Thank you so much, dude. This was amazing. And you're the first person that I've interviewed on the podcast personally about lucid dreaming. The couple stories that we've covered, Jason took those interviews. So this was awesome for me. I mean, this is definitely one of my biggest passions with dreaming, and to be able to discuss this with you, who I look up to you as, like, I mean, you're an authority in the lucid dreaming community, and to see how many parallels we have together, I mean, that really affirms a lot to me. So I appreciate you coming on and being so open about everything, and
well, thank you.
Being an elder in the community, I think, like you were saying, like, we need people who have been through the initiations, helping to show the way. So I think
I'll take that projection. I've got enough gray hair around my temple now that I can claim that.
Yeah,
enough ear hairs.
I like it. Oh, man.
So thanks, Steve. I really appreciate the forum, the deep dive, the space. Yeah, the space to go deep down into that wet well.
Yes.
Yeah, where the waters run still.
Yeah, man.
Longtime listeners of this show know how uncanny the synchronicities can be for us. What we learn and what you learn has an uncanny way of happening at just the right time. It's been that way for our guests, too. Just listen to the 2-year anniversary episode. So many testimonies. So let me tell you what happened as I was reviewing this interview. It was late, and I'd had a hard day. A relative experiencing a crisis landed on my doorstep a few days prior, and there I was, trying to get some work done during the only time I had. I was torn about what to do. You don't turn away someone you love, but I was being asked to bear someone else's cross, someone who wasn't helping themselves. And yet people were saying that I had to do it, that it was my duty. And then I heard Ryan in the interview say, no, don't cross my boundaries. No, I will not be victimized by generational trauma. And it spoke to me, and it answered my dilemma. Trauma is passed down generation to generation, and it's mostly unconscious. It's just there in your home, in your life, in your family, your school, your neighborhood, your culture, and you absorb it. You absorb it because you think you must. You think you have no other choice. It's your duty, or it's how you're supposed to love. You think it will somehow make things better, and you consent. You allow the trauma to become yours. Then that cross, it becomes yours too, and you carry it. You drag it behind you, and it weighs you down. Think about all the trauma that war inflicts and how many soldiers participate because they think it's their duty. Next thing they know, they're killing other people they have no beef with. Why? Because they accept the argument that it's their duty, it's their responsibility, that they're defending something that is not really defending them. I felt like I had no choice but to take on my relative's pain and somehow make it all better. And part of me was saying, no, it'll kill me in the end. That's trauma, my relative's trauma, and it was being passed down to me. Then Ryan said, you don't have to react the same way just because it's the way it's always been done. In fact, there's something behind the scenes while dreaming that's hoping you will pause and say, hey, wait a minute. Why do I feel like I only have one option? That there's only one answer? That there's only one way to respond? He thought of new ways to respond, and look at what happened. Well, looky there. The enemy turned into his ally. Looky there. The divine light revealed itself when he reacted with love and compassion and forgiveness. The things that look scary and dark and mean are just wounded. They're lost and they want to come home. Ryan inspired me to find a new way of reacting, compassionate, but firmly, saying no to the cross that was being passed to me, to the generational trauma that was being carried down to me. I went to bed knowing what I wanted to do, and with some help, we are finding our way through this crisis. Question your narratives. Question why you react like you do in your dreams and how you would like to react differently. Our guest on the last show, Season 3, Episode 1, Scott Sparrow, Professor Sparrow, taught us that dreams highlight our habitual responses and patterns with an eye toward helping us see where we can heal and grow. And by doing so, we open up to new dimensions of experiencing. It's happening for me, and we hope it's happening for you too. A big, super special thank you to Ryan Hurd, our special guest. Look him up at dreamstudies.org. He offers a wealth of expert knowledge on sleep paralysis and lucid dreaming. And at Dream Studies, you'll see some of the deepest insights and lessons on dreaming that you'll find anywhere. Drop by dreamsshapeus.com, our website. Look up Steve on all the major music platforms. He's known as AQ the Dreamwalker. And I'm JM DeBoard at the .com of the same name. When you go to bed tonight and fall asleep, you are going to enter a reality all its own. It's a place where you can learn and grow and heal and practice. It's a safe place created just for you and created by you. It's like a virtual reality, but don't get it confused with the virtual reality we know from technology. This one is so much more. There really is a wizard behind the curtain. Don't you want to know who or even what it is? And remember, folks, you always have a choice. Nighty night.